The desire that grows in silence before touching, she already desired. Before desiring, she already observed. And before observing, something within her had already been awakened. Feminine desire doesn't begin in the body. It begins in the imagination, in the gaze that crosses a line and pretends not to have noticed, in the instant when curiosity invades the silence, and she starts to notice you even when she tries to appear distracted. The woman feels before she understands. She observes the gestures, the tone of voice, the rhythm of breathing. Each detail is a fragment that she stores. And when the man is present, the feminine reacts, not with words, but with energy. Because the woman's desire is an invisible field. It moves slowly, feeds on absence, and grows when it is not forced. The man's mistake is thinking that desire is born from touch. But touch only awakens what her mind had already built. She doesn't desire the body. She desires the mystery. She desires to understand what he keeps behind the calm gaze, what he didn't say, what he contains. The woman desires what she cannot decipher. And that's why the predictable man will never be remembered. Because desire is not born from ease. It is born from doubt. From that feeling of not knowing for sure what he feels, but realizing that in some way he knows what she feels. Feminine desire is like fire under ice. It grows in silence. She doesn't demonstrate, doesn't speak, doesn't reveal, but she observes. And each of his gestures, each absence, each pause, everything is transformed into meaning. The woman doesn't desire with the body. She desires with time. That's why the impatient man never awakens anything beyond superficial curiosity. But the serene man, the one who speaks little and carries presence, plants the seed of fascination in the feminine. And fascination is the beginning of desire. Before continuing, tell me in the comments, where are you listening to me from now? And how old are you? Comment there. I want to know where the men are who understand that true power is not in the touch, but in the energy that precedes it. And if you're not already part of this space, subscribe. Here, we talk about what few men have the courage to study, the feminine mind and the power of masculine presence. Level 1. Curiosity. It all starts when she notices. It's not desire. It's not attraction. It's just the silent perception of a different presence in the environment. Something in her moves, but so subtly that not even she notices. Feminine curiosity is like a distant lighthouse. It doesn't illuminate everything, but it lights up enough to reveal the outline of the unknown. She observes the man without haste, without intention. She looks when he's not looking. She analyzes the tone of voice, the way he occupies the space, the calmness with which he moves among the noise of others. And in this observation, something within her awakens, a small magnetic field between the gaze and the thought. The woman doesn't desire what she understands. She desires what intrigues her, and curiosity is the first step of fascination. She doesn't want it yet. She just notices the possibility of wanting. It's the beginning of the feminine imagination, which begins to paint the man as a hypothesis of presence. At this stage, the man is still just an idea, but an idea that has smell, rhythm, and weight. She observes him talking, walking, smiling. She keeps details that he would never notice. The way he touches a glass, how he leans in to listen to someone, how he seems comfortable in his own silence. Her body doesn't react yet, but the mind begins to build. And when the feminine builds, time does the rest. Because curiosity is the first sign of energy in motion. It's the point where her mind starts to include you in her mental landscapes. The curious woman is like someone who hears a new song and doesn't know why they like it. She doesn't decide to feel, she just feels. And it is in this lightness that danger lies, because everything that starts without intention usually becomes what she can least control. The wise man understands this first level. He knows that feminine desire is not born from pressure, but from the space he creates with his own calmness. And that's why the silence of the right man speaks more than 1,000 attempts of the wrong man. She's not desiring you yet, but if she noticed you, the seed has been planted. And if you know how not to water it in a hurry, her curiosity will grow on its own. Level 2. Interest curiosity transforms when she realizes that she thinks about you even without wanting to. The gaze that was previously distant observation now begins to search. She still pretends not to notice, still tries to maintain control, but her mind is already revisiting the moment she saw you. Feminine interest is a silent web. She doesn't demonstrate, she allows. She allows the gaze to last a second longer. She allows the smile to linger an instant beyond what is necessary. She allows his name to get stuck in her mind even without apparent reason. The woman, at this level, begins to look for signs. She wants to know if he noticed her, if he understood the invisible game. But the feminine doesn't ask directly. It creates circumstances. She appears where he usually is, makes subtle comments, casts glances that say what the mouth doesn't admit. It is here that the body begins to react to the thought. The heart accelerates, the gaze flees, the breathing changes. Interest is the first physical stage of desire, and the woman's body expresses it in ways that she herself does not control. She touches her hair, adjusts her clothes, touches something to her lips. These are automatic gestures, impulses of an energy that is growing. But there is still retreat, because interest is the border between instinct and reason. She wants to, but still tries to convince herself that she doesn't want to. She feels, but defends herself from her own feeling. And it is in this contrast that the man loses or awakens the game. The common man tries to reciprocate immediately, accelerates, praises, invades the subtle space. And the interest dies because the mystery dies. But the lucid man does the opposite, maintains the rhythm, maintains the calm, maintains the silence. He lets her discover on her own what is happening inside her, and that's what transforms interest into fascination. The woman falls in love not when she is reciprocated, but when she doesn't understand what she is feeling, because the unknown feeds desire, and the man who knows how to inhabit this place without haste is the one she can't forget. Have you ever noticed when a woman starts to look at you differently, but still tries to hide it? Comment there, because the feminine gaze, when it changes, is the first sign that reason is beginning to lose control. Level 3. Fantasy and mental desire. Everything that begins as curiosity and becomes interest inevitably ends up entering the mind. And the woman's desire, unlike the man's, doesn't begin with touch. It begins with the idea of touch. It is at this point that the imagination takes command. She begins to create scenes in silence. Scenes that may never happen, but that are enough to feed what she feels. She imagines his voice closer, the distance decreasing, the breathing meeting in the same rhythm. She imagines the gaze, the gesture, the sensation of what it would be like to be there, without ever having been. Mental desire is the most dangerous, because the body is still stopped, but the mind is already surrendering. And the body, sooner or later, obeys the mind. She begins to notice everything that reminds her of him. The smell of the environment, a random song, a time of day. And each small detail becomes an involuntary trigger of presence. The woman, when she enters this stage, no longer desires the man who is in front of her. She desires the man she created inside her head. And this man is perfect, mysterious, firm. He observes her in silence, and seems to understand what she never said. Fantasy is the space where the feminine projects, the ideal masculine, and the real man begins to be judged by the strength of this image. That's why the conscious man knows. He never needs to rush. Because if she imagined him, half the way has already been traveled. And when the woman imagines, she bonds. Her mind begins to react to his presence even when he is not there. Desire begins to exist in absence. And absence is the most fertile territory for the imagination. Therefore, fantasy is the most delicate and the most powerful level, because the man hasn't done anything yet, but he already inhabits her thoughts. And when a man enters a woman's mind, he doesn't need to touch anything else, because her body already recognizes him. If you've made it this far, comment, which of these levels do you think is the most dangerous? Because mental desire is the most invisible of all, but also the most difficult to erase. Level 4. Temptation. Temptation is the instant when thought ceases to be safe. Until now, she imagined in silence. Now she begins to feel in her body what previously existed only in her mind. The mind tries to resist, but the body has another language, an ancient language, prior to reason. It's the invisible touch, the shiver that comes before contact, the gaze that lingers too long, the breathing that changes rhythm for no reason. It's the beginning of the collapse between control and impulse. The woman at this level is divided. She knows she is being pulled, but tries to convince herself that she is not. She distracts herself, changes the subject, avoids the gaze, but inside her, desire has already fully awakened. And when the feminine awakens, there is no rational argument capable of putting it back to sleep. Temptation is the field of divided consciousness. The heart accelerates and she asks herself, why am I thinking about this? But the answer doesn't come. Because desire is irrational. It doesn't ask permission. It invades. She thinks about him when she wakes up, misses something she never had, and begins to fight against her own body as if it were an external force. It is at this point that the impatient man ruins everything. He confuses her gaze with an invitation, and the desire breaks. Because feminine desire cannot stand haste. It needs space to flourish within danger, and temptation is precisely this danger, the line between wanting and resisting. The lucid man understands the power of silence. He doesn't force the instant. He waits for the right moment. He realizes that temptation is the purest test of the feminine. She wants to, but needs to trust to surrender. And trust is built in the rhythm of calm. Temptation is the fire hidden under the ice. The woman tries to keep the surface cold, but inside, everything is burning. She struggles between the fear of losing control and the curiosity of discovering what would happen if she stopped fighting. And it is exactly on this threshold that desire becomes unforgettable. Temptation is not the act. It's the prelude to the act. The instant when the energy is strongest, because it is still contained. And the man who understands this point doesn't need to advance. Because what the feminine truly desires is not to be touched in a hurry, but to be felt with mastery. Level 5. Control. After temptation invades her, something changes inside her. The woman realizes that the desire that dominated her can now be handled. The fire that previously seemed dangerous begins to become an instrument. She understands that the gaze, the gesture, the silence, everything can be used to move the masculine. It is here that desire ceases to be vulnerability and transforms into strategy. She no longer wants to just feel. She wants to test how much she can be felt, and her body, now aware of the power it possesses, begins to move with intention. The approach is measured. The smile is calculated. Each word is placed as if it carried a hidden meaning. But feminine control is not coldness. It is art. She doesn't want to manipulate the man out of malice. She wants to confirm the influence that her own desire exerts. She wants to see if he notices, if he feels, if he resists. The game becomes a dance. She provokes, retreats, observes, repeats. And the intensity of desire increases because there is no complete surrender. The common man yields too quickly. He gives up control and, along with it, gives up respect. But the lucid man understands the movement. He knows that each provocation is a test, and that the power of the masculine is not in reacting, but in remaining unshakable. The woman respects the man who perceives the game and still maintains his axis. She feels his mastery, and this unbalances her, because the control she believed she had dissolves before a firmer presence. It is the silent clash between two opposing forces, the feminine that wants to prove influence and the masculine that proves mastery without raising its voice. This level is dangerous because the woman now is her own conscious desire. She knows what awakens, she knows what causes, and she experiences the power of being the center of attention. But the more she controls, the more she clings to her own energy. Because desire, when it is power, ceases to be light. And what was pleasure begins to weigh. Have you ever noticed when she desires you but pretends not to? When the eyes say the opposite of what the mouth tries to deny? This is the sign that she is at this level. It is no longer the woman who observes. It is the woman who tests your strength. And the man who understands this moment doesn't need to compete. He just observes, breathes, and lets the game unfold on its own. Because in the end, control never belongs to those who try to dominate, but to those who don't need to prove that they dominate. Level 6. Hunger and need to possess. There comes a point when desire ceases to be delicate. Fantasy, control, provocation, everything dissolves before something stronger. She no longer wants to just imagine. She wants to feel. She wants presence, touch, contact. She wants the weight of the real. The body speaks louder than the mind. And the feminine, which until now played with fire, now wants to burn completely. It is the point where curiosity has transformed into urgency. The hunger is not just physical, it is emotional. She wants the man not for who he is, but for how he makes her feel. Her gaze changes. There is no more subtlety, no more disguise. She observes you as someone who measures distance before crossing, and each movement becomes charged with intention. The touch on the arm, the brief smile, the prolonged silence, everything is an invitation, but a silent, ancestral, inevitable invitation. The man who doesn't understand this stage gets lost. He confuses desire with surrender, passion with depth. But the lucid man knows. This is the phase where the body asks, but the soul still tests. Because even when desire dominates her, the woman still seeks security in the man's energy. She wants to feel his warmth, but wants to know if the warmth comes from presence or from neediness. If it is presence, she surrenders. If it is neediness, she moves away. Feminine hunger is not vulgar. It is spiritual. She wants to touch what is true, to feel that her body has been understood and not just desired. She wants to feel his calm in the midst of chaos, the mastery in the midst of instinct. Because what really awakens the feminine is not the touch itself. It is the control within the touch. The woman at this level wants to get lost, but only in the hands of someone who doesn't get lost with her. She wants the man who doesn't fear the fire, who contains it firmly, who enters desire without losing direction. Feminine desire at this point is brute force, but the man who knows how to deal with it neither retreats nor advances too much. He just sustains. And it is this sustenance that transforms hunger into surrender. Because when the masculine remains whole, the feminine dissolves and trusts. It is at this level that desire becomes dangerous. Because the woman no longer desires the man. She desires what he awakens within her. And this type of desire is the most difficult to forget. Level 7. Obsession in the domain of desire. Every fire that is not contained ends up consuming its own air. And that's what happens when desire goes from feeling to needing. The woman no longer desires just the man. She desires possession over what he represents. Her mind no longer rests. What was previously curiosity becomes constant search. She looks for signs, messages, presences, traces. She wants to understand what he thinks, where he is, who he talks to. But what she really wants is to go back to feeling what she felt when he was near. Desire has turned into abstinence. At this stage, the feminine has already lost control. She no longer seeks the experience. She seeks the repetition of the sensation. Her body asks for the return of something it doesn't know how to name. And the man now becomes a symbol of everything she wants to relive, of everything that made her feel alive, desired, complete. Obsession is the reflection of the loss of axis. It is the point where desire ceases to be a choice and transforms into emotional prison. She moves away, tries to deny, but the thought returns. She tries to erase, but the body remembers. And the more she tries to forget, the more the unconscious takes care of reminding her. Feminine desire, when it reaches this level, ceases to be impulse and becomes energetic dependence. She no longer wants the man in himself. She wants the feeling he provokes. She wants the mirror he represents, the power he awakens, the intensity that the world around her doesn't offer. The obsessed woman doesn't want the real. She wants the meaning he brings. She wants control of what she feels, but her own feeling already dominates her. It is a silent war between reason and instinct, between the fear of getting lost and the pleasure of continuing to feel. Obsession is the tragic form of unbalanced love. It is the point where the woman doesn't love the man, but the effect he has on her. And this effect is addictive. She seeks him as someone seeks a medicine, even knowing that it is her own poison. Therefore, the wise man recognizes the limit. He understands when the enchantment transforms into domination. and he chooses not to feed what has already gone too far. Because true power is not in being desired, but in being able not to let oneself be imprisoned by the desire of others. The feminine at this level consumes itself, and the masculine that understands the cycle observes the fire going out, not with coldness, but with respect. Because everything that burned too much inevitably needs to turn to ashes to be reborn clean. And it is at this point that the lucid man moves away, knowing that desire, when it turns into obsession, is no longer admiration. It is dependence disguised as love. The man who understands desire without being dominated by it. Feminine desire is an ancient force. It begins with a look and ends with an abyss. It doesn't ask permission, doesn't explain, doesn't warn. It just grows. And the man who doesn't understand this nature ends up being dragged by its intensity. But the lucid man observes. He understands that desire is like the sea. He doesn't need to face it, just respect the movement. He knows that the feminine is made of tides. It approaches, retreats, returns, disappears. And that the mistake of men is trying to hold the wave instead of learning to remain standing. Understanding feminine desire is not trying to decipher it. It is accepting that it is born from mystery and lives on what is invisible. It is realizing that the more the man tries to understand with his mind, the less the feminine feels him with her body. Because desire is not an equation, it is an energy. And energy only respects those who have learned to respect their own silence. The man who masters himself is never mastered by anyone. He knows that the woman's enchantment is beautiful, but that the enchantment loses value when it turns into control. He observes the cycle of desire with the serenity of someone who no longer seeks approval. And when the feminine realizes this, something changes. She desires him not for his body, but for the peace he transmits. True masculine power is not in awakening desire, but in remaining whole before it. Because the man who awakens without getting lost becomes what the modern world has forgotten, an axis in the midst of chaos. A man who feels but doesn't surrender to feeling, who observes the fire but maintains control over the flames, who understands that love, desire, and power only make sense when they are born from consciousness. In the end, feminine desire is beautiful, until the moment it ceases to be a choice. And the wise man is the one who knows how to recognize when the enchantment has turned into a trap. He doesn't run away from the fire, but he knows when to get out of it. This is true mastery, not controlling the other, but remaining in possession of oneself. If this message spoke to you, subscribe and continue following the series. Here, what is spoken about is not about techniques, but about what makes a man imperturbable. Because in the end, it is not the strongest man who wins, it is the man who understands desire and remains whole before it.